and specificity are very important.
Let's go to India now, to Ashni Monod, because obviously India, the biggest democracy in the world, but many people feel that the Indian democracy is failing at the moment.
Well, recently we've seen a lot of people protesting in India, a huge explosion of democracy and expression of it. People protesting against violence against women, but the government has stuttered and has maintained silence and hasn't responded adequately to these issues. So my question would be, how do we actually, how do we get governments to deal with women's rights and issues and freedom in the developing world, without which we cannot even consider it to be a true democracy?
I would like to say that democracy is not a quick fix, and therefore we see challenges even in old, well-established democracies like India. But the fact that there were these huge street protests is a demonstration of democracy. And in my own country, South Africa, we took the opportunity of receiving help from the international community to have a very good constitution.
Tom Friedman, what do you see about the ability of politicians 2 years on? They didn't understand what was happening then. Do they understand what's happening now?
Well, I think, you know, reality has a way of imposing itself, and it has, you know, across the Arab world. As I said, we're all in two-way conversations now. I, as a columnist, am in a two-way conversation. President Obama's in a two-way conversation. No more one-way conversations, just top-down. But I think, you know, when I hear my friend George, you know, I'm reminded I actually came to Cairo via Davos from Singapore. I was visiting Singapore the week of Tahrir Square. And I felt like I'd come from a country where on any given day the entire government can be debating how better to teach fractions to third graders, to a country where that thought had never crossed the leader's mind. Now that is very relevant now, because we're discussing, you know, the fate and future of Arab democracy, and Lord knows, you know, I'm rooting for this in every way possible. But the world hasn't stopped. It's gotten more connected. I just wrote a book about America because I'm worried about my own democracy right now. And the theme of this book, it's called That Used to Be Us. I'm worried about my own country. And
well, President Obama has said very clearly in his inaugural speech on Monday, he said, quote, "We will support democracy from Asia to Africa, from the Americas to the Middle East."
Right, but the question is, you know, how we do that. And I think the thing that is needed, you know, most in terms of the kind of aid we can give is, you know, this is about giving people the tools, I think, to realize their full potential. China is not waiting. India is not waiting. America is not waiting. We live in a world where average is over. Okay? We live in a world where the high-wage, middle-skilled job is disappearing. And what worries me so much is the Arab world is taking an unnecessary, I understand, but a timeout from what's been happening in the schools in Egypt, what's been happening, you know, in the universities. Are people getting the skills and education they need to thrive in this world?
Well, let me pick up on that very point. Kishore Mahbubani, Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School, happened to be in Singapore, of course, but you've got a very important point, because the analysis that you're building on of democracies in the West and how they fail really to understand this new reality because they're not very good at it themselves.
This has been a fascinating debate. It's really brought up the complexity of the issue. But one dimension that's really sadly missing in this debate is that while we all agree, all of us agree that democracy is the best form of government, but Winston Churchill also warned us that democracy is the worst form of government except for the alternative. And the lesson that we are learning in recent years, and I'm glad Tom referred to it, is that the most advanced democracies today in Europe and America are struggling. And the struggling, I mean, it's amazing that the United States of America, which used to be the beacon of democracy for the world, is now caught in this amazing political paralysis, and it can't make fundamental decisions about debt, about fiscal balancing, because of a total polarization. Now, what's going wrong here? So I think the lesson that we should learn about democracy essentially is that it is the best form of government, but it is also the worst form of government, and we should be aware of the dangers and difficulties of democratic transitions, and someone should write a book about that and give it to every new country that is making the transition.
Salil Shetty of Amnesty International, your concerns when you look at the way democracy is developing or not?
I think it finally boils down to how power is distributed and managed in a society, because look at Greece. I mean, you're talking about countries which have elections. Greece, which is supposedly the birthplace of democracy as we understand it, is in a big mess. The people of Greece are really upset with the way it's being governed. And the reason that's happening is that there's a handful of people who have obviously misused the resources, and the consequences being felt by those who are the weakest in the society. So if you have societies which cannot allow people, particularly those who are at the bottom of the pile, if they don't have a voice, if they don't feel that they have a right to participate in decision making, elections alone are not going to solve the problem. So, in fact, my provocative question to the panel was going to be that if you're a democracy and you've had elections, does that make human rights violations in your country any less harmful?
Foreign Minister Davutoglu, of course, you are under pressure, partly as part of your accession to the European Union from our business, apart from anything else, the media, because you do detain quite a lot of journalists. Human rights and democracy.
That's, of course, a very important question, but first, let me address to the first comment. I fully agree the transformation is not only in the Middle East. There's a huge transformation in Europe as well. Democracies are being transformed based on the economic crisis. Now, the accountability is the basic value of democracy, but who will be accountable for the economic crisis in Greece? European Central Bank or Greek government? After a while, there will be more and more questions about European democracy as well. Who should be addressed or blamed at the end of the day if all decisions is being taken by Brussels? In fact, this is a transformation of Westphalian system. In the Middle East, Sykes-Picot system is changing. In Europe, Westphalian system is being transformed. About human rights,
and Turkey.
About human rights and Turkey. The main mission of our government was to extend human rights and democratization in our country. No democracy or no country is perfect in that sense. But our way, our objective is to increase the level of human rights and to prevent any human rights violation. This is the basic mission of Turkish government or any government. But of course, there are many tests. Sometimes we have to address and we have to take more and more concrete steps to make our democracy, especially regarding human rights, much better than before and closer to the perfect. And there are many challenges.
One critical human right is equality for women in the democratic change. Barbara Stocking, Chief Executive of Oxfam.
I'm very concerned about what's happening with women's rights. At the beginning of the Arab Spring in Egypt, I talked to our colleagues who were in Tahrir Square, and the thing that moved them the most was that they were standing equal with men. The men were treating them very respectfully. They said, this is a new start. They said, this is never going to go back. Now, they don't say that to me now. They say they are very, very concerned about what's happening in Egypt, but in the Arab world across the board as well. And I'd really like to know what the panel think about that.
Navi Pillay, do you see resistance, or do you see at least embracing of the principle by and large?
The stereotypes are there. I was so pained when I heard the former Minister of Singapore speak of one man, one vote. Women have been voting for some time.
One person, one vote.
Yes. What the international community can do is sustained assistance. International NGOs, for instance, Oxfam, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, can play such a role in strengthening national human rights activists so that they could speak for themselves. Whether a woman follows a particular religion, no religion, or comes from a developed country or not a developed country, pain is pain. They hate to be beaten, and they want equal salaries for equal work. So the claim of rights is the same, but they need to learn to articulate this for themselves and to convince their governments to give them participation in the decision-making process.
And finally, Amma Musa, do you fear what Barbara Stocking is saying, that actually the equality of women is beginning to slip in the democracy you're seeing developing in your country? Quickly, please.
Yes, indeed. We need to do more. And the Constitution did not succeed in assuring women of their equality with men. And that's why we left the Constituent Assembly. That's why we protested. We have a distance to go. But we are not going starting from scratch. Egypt has a lot of rights for women, jobs for women, contribution of women in the society, but We are still in the first 50%. We want to cross the threshold and move on. And through the Constitution, that's why we are asking for an amendment for the articles dealing with women in the Constitution.
Amma Musa, thank you. Let me just quote to you one email that we've received during this debate. Democracy is not instant coffee. Democracy will not win unless it's inclusive, serves its people, and is just. And I can see everyone nodding at that point. Thank you all very much indeed. 2 years ago, here in Davos, the meeting became mesmerized by the extraordinary events in Egypt and Tunisia. 2 years from now, will there be less or more democracy in North Africa, the Middle East, and right across the world with other nations where authoritarian leaderships are out of touch? Well, that's it from this BBC World Debate. Thanks to our panel, to all of you who have contributed your thoughts and questions, and many more, I know, had ideas, and our global audience around the world on television, radio and online. From me, Nick Gowing, here in Davos at the World Economic Forum, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.